Hello and welcome to Pulsecast, the podcast exploring the key trends in media technology. Today we will talk about AI and its legal risk with Damon Neale, who is CEO of Metadat-AI. Thanks, Damon, for being with us today.
Thanks for having me.
Okay, Damon, can you tell us a little bit about your background, your current business, and why you created it as well?
Yes, of course. Thank you. Yeah, so I've been a CTO and consultant and solution architect in media and entertainment for the last 15 years. And I actually founded and sold an AI company. I started in 2016 and sold in 2020. And from then, have been setting up Metadata, as you mentioned. And one of the reasons for it was because I've been trying to resell other AIs as a systems integrator and solution architect, but just really found that it didn't actually meet people's needs, because typically it's too expensive or too complicated to understand the pricing, or as we'll kind of cover today, issues with kind of security, privacy, and legal issues. So the only way for me to actually solve those was to build my own. So over the last 4 years, I've been building up Metadat-AI to solve all of these problems. And throughout it, I've realized it's been such a legal minefield that even trying to get legal advice on this stuff, it's been near impossible. So also in parallel, if it wasn't tough enough as it is to launch a business, I've been studying law and I'll be a qualified solicitor in England and Wales soon.
Congratulations on that, Damon. And I think in terms of the legal risk of AI, my perception is that it's something that perhaps was disregarded. I'm hearing a little bit more about it now, so more people are talking about it, which is good, but perhaps it's still a little bit too much disregarded, and it's something is going to become more important in the future. I'm interested in hearing what you think about the legal risk of AI, what you think are the legal risk, and what you think is being particularly overlooked particularly by vendors in our industry, the media technology industry.
Sure. Yeah, no, unfortunately, it is being overlooked quite a lot. And I think it's at various levels in the organization. So you've got the leadership teams who, in some cases, are being a little bit ignorant or are waiting for kind of laws to evolve and come out, but they've actually come out. And sometimes it's also right at the bottom of the pyramid where you've got all of the workers and users who are using AI either irresponsibly or often, again, out of ignorance, just like they haven't had the training or there's no company policies to direct them. Or it could be that tools have just now got AI embedded. So some of the actual issues that this is causing that are kind of being overlooked is essentially we're having a lot of like confidential company secrets being sent to third parties for like processing and then being accessible to competitors. There's a few examples of lawsuits in the US where I think one was with Samsung, and they were suing an employee for posting basically private proprietary code into tools like ChatGPT. And then there's been examples of competitors being able to find that in a prompt later because they've actually used that data to train their models, and it then becomes available to competitors. And similarly, that also leads into another one of vendors are training models on clients' data without permission, and without licensing or anything. So there's a lot of them. You don't even have the option to opt out. And if you send your data to them, they will train a model on it. So it's important to check that. Some people are against it. Some people, if it's your intellectual property, you might not actually own the rights. Maybe you've acquired the rights from somewhere else, and you don't own the rights to actually use it in that way. So you might be breaching your contracts. There's also like issues of who owns like the output, for example. So the output of a generative AI model at the moment is not seen as copyrightable material. And then you've got businesses relying on it and using that in their content. And if they did want to protect it, it's just not possible. And these vendors aren't warning people of these risks, but providing the features. Loads of stuff with like processing personal data, GDPR, and the new EU AI Act as well. There's a lot of, and even Data Protection Act, there's so much stuff there, but I don't know why we've been really conscious of GDPR for years, and then AI has come out, and now where facial recognition is seen as a high risk category for some of these laws. And then also just bias as well, as that a lot of the tools aren't really addressing biases in data, and some of the decision making is on some very important things. I think the only area I'm seeing where vendors are really paying close attention are things like insurance decisions, because there's additional kind of regulation on that. But otherwise, a lot of vendors in our space are, some of the decisions, some of the biases are having an impact, and people aren't really managing those.
Thanks, Damon. If you had to kind of single out the main reasons why these risks are being overlooked by vendors, is it because of the buzz around AI and everyone wants to jump on the bandwagon, and in order to do that, things have to move quickly? What are the main reasons from your perspective?
Yeah, I think one of the main reasons is because AI, it's very difficult to train an AI model. You need a lot of data, like millions and millions of data points, and acquiring that can be really tricky. So I've got some clients who are quite keen to open up their library and sell licenses to it for training. And then others who are like, no, this is our IP, or we've got mixed rights ourselves, we don't really want to share it. So it's really a mixed bag. There is a lot of open source content out there, but the quality, the level of tagging, and also the application to our field, we've seen lots of object models that will find things like dogs and cats and chairs really, really well, but it's not actually stuff that we really want to find. So accessing the licensed databases, like Getty Images, for example, got lots of great content. Big broadcasters, so many great franchises. But to access that, if you are to pay a license, it's often in the millions, and these AI startups just can't afford it. And then the larger companies that are getting billions of investment, they're actually just scraping the internet anyway and ignoring copyright. And there's many cases against that. But I think availability of data is a real issue. I also think just lack of understanding of the law and what the requirements are, and that ignorance almost has led to focusing on features, like let's produce something really cool and not worry so much about the regulation, which in the US, since Trump repealing Biden's AI executive order, is less of a problem. But in the UK and in Europe, that we still really care, and there's the EU AI Act and all the other acts out there that are relevant that mean you can't just go about and do that. So I think they're some of the main reasons why people are why vendors are not actually following all of this.
Yeah, and I think it seems like almost like the regulation is chasing technology, and technology is going at a different speed. But also technology vendors and more simply people using the technology have to follow how to use it and to inform themselves almost constantly, because there's an AI race almost at the moment. So you talked about features, and I'm seeing like features being released and new things constantly also when it comes to AI. So it's becoming more difficult, so it's good to be aware of this, I think. What do you think?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, no, there's I think it's been true of most new technology where the innovation kind of happens first and then regulation follows afterwards, and there's that constant balance and battle between innovation and regulation. And I think right now it's most prevalent between the EU and kind of US. So President Biden had created the EU AI Act, Biden's AI executive order.
Yeah.
And for that one, it was about regulating, making sure, not just about regulation, but like protecting people and making sure that models were kind of transparent, and anything that was particularly high risk was reported to the government and used good practices and the kind of stuff that we would expect. I didn't really feel it limited innovation. It just expected businesses to go a little bit further to make sure that their systems were safe and that it was possible to hold them accountable by sharing information. But As mentioned, Trump has now repealed that in favor of let's put in loads of money into AI development and innovation almost at any cost, regardless of how that impacts people, which to some extent can be good, because if you have really fast innovation, then kind of regulate later, you could come up with some really great solutions. But it's who you upset in the meanwhile. And yeah, we're more than happy to talk about some of the legal cases that are going on at the moment. There's a lot of companies feeling the pain. But in the EU, as is quite common, it has taken a little while to come out, but it came out in March 2024. The EU AI Act, that is, it's now there, it's in force. But interestingly, even though the innovation in AI has been going on for years now, so arguably it's a little bit late. I actually think it was quite quick to coming compared to some previous kind of tech and regulation and innovation. But still, businesses just aren't aware. Like when I speak to some business leaders, they're like, "Oh yeah, we're waiting for the kind of regulation to come out on that." And I'm like, "Well, yes, the UK hasn't necessarily got explicit acts for it, but copyright and all the rest of it that's been around for many years still applies, and data protection acts and all of that." And even those have been updated to cover like the digital age, which the definitions are so broad that they do cover this to an extent, or it would be interpreted to cover it at least. But the EU AI Act has been out for a while, and people aren't aware of it. And I tell them about it. I'm like, yeah, you should look at this. And before that, there was even the EU's Data Protection Act that some of these vendors and even clients of mine are breaching. So I'm trying to get everyone up to speed with talks like this as well. But yeah, it's just not really. I guess you don't get PR on regulation so much as you do on new features.
Yeah, but at the same time, ignorance, which I think is, or lack of awareness, which I think is one of the main reasons behind this, as you pointed out, is not an excuse in front of the law, right? It's not something that excuse. So it's good that you are talking about it and that we are talking about it, because I think it's something that people should be more aware of. Are there any potential solutions, even easy things or easy fixes that businesses could adopt to improve in this area?
Yeah, definitely. So I think the main one is actually education. So having awareness of what acts are there. I don't expect everyone to read them because they're not much fun to read. They're very long and complex. That said, it is possible, and a lot of these vendors, and actually a lot of the vendors don't have legal teams. They're actually quite lean and agile, but a lot of clients like broadcasters do have legal teams that could have a look and interpret. That said, as I try to find AI kind of specialist lawyers, and they didn't actually understand AI well enough to be able to truly apply it. So I've been trying to educate. I've written a course on AI as well, so that people understand what AI is and where it can apply and what some of the risks are. So there is information out there and coming out as well to help educate. And it has to be throughout the whole kind of pyramid of the company. The leaders at the top, if they were to define, have a better understanding of these things, and then use that to create things like generative AI policies to define how the business actually uses AI, or at least generative AI, and then filters that down through some training. And also, I think that should be through like an AI council. So like a steering committee with representatives of all of the different departments in the business. So that's HR, that's tech, that's the, maybe the production teams. If you've got representatives of all of that, you can find out and come up with stuff that will work for everyone. So it might be that your creative team still want to use LLMs for generating scripts, but maybe you can just inform them, some of these LLMs have settings that you can prevent them from training on your data. And there might be some that run on local devices. You're not sending proprietary or confidential data externally, which might breach other contracts. So your legal representative's like, oh, we can't do that. And you can find tools and solutions, hopefully like my own, that have understood that and worked around it to meet the various kind of legal and security requirements and stuff that businesses have. So I think it really starts with education, and then the business just sitting down and think about, okay, AI is here and it's going to stay. How can we use it to optimize our business, but how can we do it in the right way? And then let's make sure our teams are educated to know what our expectations of what we want them to do and how to use it, and that they know how to use it responsibly.
Thanks, Damon. Lots of interesting things in there. I think education is one of the things they've always suggested when it comes to security as well. So I think it's one of the things they have in common. Cybersecurity has been a topic in the industry for a few years. So that's interesting for me. But the new thing is, I think, and I agree with you, is this multidisciplinary approach to AI, because it's arguably because it's a complex subject. So you don't need only specialists anymore. You need, like, in your case, a mixed background. You've got both the technology part and the legal side now. And if you in teams and in organizations, you need multiple teams and departments that can bring a diversity of perspectives, right?
Yes, yeah, and I think so. That's where there's a couple of interesting things you said there. Actually, one is in terms of the multidisciplinary, that's where I think an AI council makes a lot of sense, because it is so complex now, and it's a little bit unfair, because I think if you go back years before regulation and you could kind of get away with doing whatever you wanted, to an extent, you could just move forwards quickly and make progress. But now the problem is we're finding AI is having such an impact on things like security, the decisions it's making affecting people's lives, and actually a lot of stuff, even things like facial recognition being classed as high risk by the EU, that we do need to be more responsible. But it's very difficult to know what that is if you're a business leader and you're not really on the ground making the productions. You don't want to limit what they're doing. You don't even know necessarily how they're doing it in a large organization. And then similarly, technology, AI is quite complicated. It's not just AI, it's often hosting it in the cloud, and good DevOps practices and all these different ways of doing things, and collecting of the data is almost a separate thing to AI. That's a whole art in itself. And then prompt engineering, there's so many different things at all ends. But understanding the technology and how it works, you really need technical people for that. As I said, with law, all of it, there's so many different disciplines. So actually bringing people together in what is often referred to as an AI council to have these conversations is going to really, really help. And I've actually been forming some for clients and sitting at the head to kind of chair them, but also provide, from my business experience of starting up several businesses, that angle, and trying to translate the business needs over to production that I've been advising for years. And then the technology side as a CTO for 9 years for one company and 4 years for the other AI company I sold, able to bridge that technology side, and then now finally the legal, so that between them I can get everyone talking on the same in the same way, and try and translate between the teams so they can kind of agree what do we need and how do we need it. But I also thought it was interesting you commented on how security is very similar with the education side. This is something I've been saying. I'm a CTO on a board for a charity as well, and for them, I had a lot of issues with just spam emails, something that we've had for years, and we've got tools and we've got strict filters and stuff in. But it just every single time, like, oh, this is terrible. This is legal emails and stuff coming in. We need to make sure that they're not receiving spam and responding to them. How can we protect against this? And every time, every bit of advice is the best defense is education. More people know about it, and the more people know about it to a good enough level. This is true. Like, you've got the NIST, America's kind of like advice body on this, and you've got the National Centre of Cybersecurity in the UK. All pretty much saying the same thing: free resources to learn about it, and advising, education, and as we were saying, communication as well internally in your teams to truly understand this and how to apply it. That they're really the ways to do it.
Yeah, security came to mind because I guess people have a similar reaction to the legal aspects of AI and security, in the sense that some of them will say, "Oh, boring," or "I don't want to hear about it," compared to other topics in the industry that feel more exotic and exciting. But these are also topics we need, because they are good for the sustainability the industry as well. So it's good to talk about it. And we mentioned education, you mentioned education and governance as well. And in terms of legal frameworks, could you give us like an overview of the legal frameworks people could use to view this AI legal landscape?
Yes, definitely. And that's this is one of the problems why it's so complex, because actually it's not the first time, but it's probably most recently an example of where a technology has crossed so many different things, and especially because AI can do so many different things depending on what you train it to do. So it really depends, but you've got a lot of older frameworks, things like copyright acts in just international copyright acts that various different countries that are quite aligned on copyright. Things like designs and patents as well, and the ownership of the intellectual property that comes out that you need to be aware of. And more than happy to go into detail on all of these. But there's also GDPR, which especially what's quite interesting with that one is AI is often producing or inferring personal data about people, like their age or facial recognition. Well, under GDPR, that technically counts as personal data, even though it was made up, inferred by the AI. It's not something you put in. That still applies. The Data Protection Act in the UK, and also the similar acts abroad as well. Since 2024, you've got things like the EU AI Act, which really focuses on protecting people and also transparency in general. And in fact, actually, a lot of these are safety focused, the new AI kind of acts. You've got the White House AI Executive Order, parts of that it's been repealed, but there are other things that Biden brought in. As well as actually there's many US state ones. There's been one for a while in California about bots, and you have to tell people that it's a bot that you're speaking to, or that something was generated by AI. But you go across, it's very diverse across the US, because each state almost, or not all of them, but there are some main states. Exactly, yeah. So you've got the kind of the government like telling you this is what we're expecting, but then each individual state is regulating slightly differently. So really, then depending on the states you're operating in, you kind of need an expert to know. And what's quite interesting actually about some of these acts is they are now shifting from where the work is done to where the product is delivered. So I'm more than happy to speak about it, but there's some examples of cases where the arguments are, oh, but no training was done in that country, so I'm not in breach of that country's laws. But the EU AI Act is, where are you using the model, not where did you train it. So if you use it in the EU, you have to comply. But no, there's those more. There's agencies like the Alan Turing Institute and NIST who have got guidance and frameworks and risk management recommendations, and like process, even like iterative process recommendations and frameworks for that. There's even like ISOs now. So 42001 is very similar to 9001 if you're familiar with it, the quality one, but very much focused on risk management and quality of AI processes. And the list goes on. There's so many of them. So it just really depends on where you're operating, but they do have some common themes, which makes it a bit easier.
Yeah, I think we need another episode for this, because it's it's a long list, and I'm interested in, but there are a lot of nuances and subtleties, so I think it would be interesting to explore them. But I wanted to also talk to end the episode. I also wanted to talk about the likely impact of this kind of situation, this landscape on businesses, particularly businesses disregarding this risk. What could be the impact on the industry, both in the short term and in the long term, from your perspective?
Yeah, no, good question. So I think that some of the impact of these things is biggest ones possibly, but we've got a lot of AI models now being trained on copyrighted material. And what happens when, we've already, for example, the EU AI Act says that if it's not for research purposes and people have opted out, then that's illegal. And these models are being used internationally. They are being used in the EU. So technically, the rug is being kind of swept out underneath them. So some of the best models we've got have been trained on, everything on the internet. If it all of a sudden makes that entire model illegal, does that then set us back in terms of, so some of this great functionality we're getting used to, like ChatGPT for summarizing and answering questions that most of us are using today, does that mean we can't use it? And does it also kill that company because the company is completely based on effectively stolen copyright? So it could have a real impact on the development of AI and that kind of innovation. But then at the same time, it's kind of been coming and been needed, because where else have you been able to just steal other people's copyright and kind of get away with it? Like, yes, fine, it might not necessarily be included in the output directly, but we asked, there's many cases, again, Getty Images with Stable Diffusion case, where it is actually, even including the Getty logo in the output. So it is in there. It's just coming out in different forms, and even Disney as well, some of their characters coming out in AI models. So it's clearly been trained on AI, on Disney material. But also some of the other impacts of this on the maybe being a bit negative, but there's a lot of businesses avoiding AI because they're scared. It's too complex. We don't understand it. So our business policy, at least I have a policy, which is good, is we're just not going to use it because it's too high risk. And until it's clearer, we're not going to touch it, which is a shame because I think it can benefit a lot. And again, that's where that education comes in. If you understand where and how to use it and how to actually look at your vendors and see if and how they're complying, then you can use it safely and responsibly to benefit your business. I think also it is adding some kind of some of the impact as well, is it is adding a bit more cost, a bit more to kind of deploying them and even building them as well. For me, it's taken me a lot of time to get to kind of similar places that some other vendors have got to, because I've been trying to do it responsibly. So it's a bit weird where you've got some kind of more established companies out there who have been able to move faster, but then cheating by doing these internet scrapes, versus me trying to eat every single image, have it in a spreadsheet and track every single license I have for every single image. It does slow things down, and I think then it does slow down the procurement process, I think, because now some broadcasters are becoming a lot more conscious of it and actually checking these kind of things, which again, these acts are, and transparency is trying to actually enforce and make a legal requirement. But I think they're some of the kind of impacts for the moment.
Okay, thank you. And that's interesting. And I think, I'm kind of seeing some of that as well. I would say that it applies to different realms, not just our industry. So it's interesting to hear it from you as well. And if you had to make a kind of prediction of based on this in terms of how what the future technology landscape in our industry will look like in a few years' time, what would you say?
Yeah, it's a tough one because I think it could really go either way. Yeah, it's so on the one hand, you've got like billions upon billions, tens and tens of billions going into investing into AI companies who are in breach of copyright. They're scraping copyrighted material from the whole internet, or even some proprietary data sources that are trying to block you from doing that. They're bypassing those things because they're really good data. Like again, Getty image example, Disney content example. It's very much known that those movies belong to Disney, and you don't have permission to use them in that way. So there's so many billions going in, and there's I think more than 10 cases against OpenAI at the moment just on this, open right now. But we've seen this in the past where it's if you just throw enough money at it, and especially in the US, and especially since the repeal of the AI executive order by Trump and deregulation, it seems like they're more keen to just push forwards, invest loads of money in it, grow big, and almost like in the Uber example, where it kind of took over taxi drivers or the taxi industry by offering really low cost travel, and then like 5 times the pricing afterwards when they'd kind of killed the industry. I wonder if they're going to go that route where they're offering it really cheaply. They can just invest so much in it and dominate the world, and then the prices will jump up later. And it's might be on illegal content, but it's kind of they're too big to touch by that point. And if anyone is big enough to challenge them and take some money out of them, fine, if you sue them for 50 million, that might be pocket change for them by that point. So I fear that on one side, we're going to have that, and it could be that we have these giant models that are completely untouchable, billions of investment, backed by Microsoft and some of the big companies in the world. And then on the other hand, you've got the AI Act and all of these frameworks and that are saying, no, you can't do that. And if you operate that in our territory, then it's illegal. And then do we kind of take a step back, and models like mine and the work that I've been doing all of a sudden jump to the top? But I only have I think I've got 30 different models, roughly around that number at the moment, for different purposes and use cases. But it's not the thousands upon thousands of models that are out there. Does it limit what's available to us? And for us, it's not so much of a problem because mine's targeted at our industry, but some of them are also useful, other stuff to be reapplied. But if it changes, if these companies die overnight, that's going to have quite an unsettling impact on the markets, on the economy. And so also, if you think if broadcasters have invested in a tool that then just becomes illegal overnight as well, what's the business risk of that? All the time and money spent integrating and making it part of the workflow, and all the data you've now got in your systems, you have to remove it. It's a bit of a tricky one, but that's why I think it could either go that way of just being entirely pulled, or they just kind of push on forwards, which I think has been happening for a long time and it's now got Trump support. But it is really difficult to be compliant. But for me, I've tried to predict that and go, okay, if it does go that way, if I try and be sensible, comply with all these acts and laws, and read them all and try and understand all of them, and make sure that the libraries that I'm using, I have licenses to, and the way I'm training and processing is in line with all of this, then if and when that comes, I'm ready. And if it doesn't come, I'm finding that customers are really appreciating being that responsible and that risk averse for them, because ultimately, maybe it's not necessarily more okay for B2C, but when it's B2B, businesses need to operate within the law. They need to be responsible, need to be doing things properly, because it's business risk avoidance, it's risk mitigation. And while technically the laws still apply to individuals are less concerned about risk mitigation, because worst that happens is they lose out on their £20 a month subscription. But for a business, it could be millions of pounds of revenue and lots of cleanup and brand reputation and other impacts.
Yeah, and I think this is my impression. It's not based on solid evidence, but my impression is that more people are talking about it, and it is becoming gradually more important, particularly, as you say, for business leaders as they become more aware of it. Yeah, thanks, Damon, for being with us today. It was a pleasure to talk to you about these topics.
Thanks for having me. As you say, it's best we need to talk about this, and this is a great platform to be able to keep people informed so we can move forward carefully.